if I go on, let's say, a dating app, very difficult in quarantine, surprisingly enough.
You should consider dating an anime character. They can't contract COVID.
I think Twitch chat can.
I got it. I figured it out.
Right,
Take 4.
I'm gonna get really good at describing this.
Yeah, you're gonna get awesome at describing it. I think I had my Be Right Back screen on.
Oh, okay, cool. So, a waifu is a fictional character that you have a romantic love for that is indistinguishable from a romantic love that you might feel for another human being. It's important to note that this is an anime character and not a cartoon character. The difference being that the style is a lot more focused into being either cute or cool, and also anime tends to have a lot more plot, which means that you can have a lot more character development, a lot more thorough character writing, whereas in a cartoon such as Simpsons has a circular narrative. They always end up back on the couch. Characters don't really change much.
Why is that important?
Because you connect so much more with the character when you see them grow and you see them change as a person and you see them go through like hardships that stick with them.
Interesting. Okay. So in that sort of mirrors, so what I'm hearing you say is that sort of plot development and character and personal growth, or character growth in an anime, kind of mirrors real life in a sense more, because romantic interests with human beings also involve sort of growth and change.
Yeah, I wouldn't know too much,
Okay.
but I would think so. That sounds about right.
Okay. So, I mean, can you have a waifu who is not from anime?
Probably. You'll probably get called weird even more so than having a normal waifu.
Okay.
But I imagine that's probably the case for some people.
What would be weird about that?
It's just not even so weird as in the act itself is stranger. It's just less common and therefore more noteworthy.
I see. Okay, beautifully put. And so if I understand you correctly, the core of a relationship with a waifu is a feeling of love. So it's entirely like an internal feeling of romantic love.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of different people with a whole lot of different thoughts, and a lot of them do consider themselves in relationships. I do not. I think, by definition, a relationship requires 2 consenting parties. So I don't consider myself in a relationship, but I do still have that feeling of indistinguishable love.
Okay. So you have a feeling of love. And so then let me ask you a question. How is that different from... Okay, so I see what you're saying. So there's a difference between being in love with a waifu and having a relationship.
Yes.
And so can you help us understand the people who have relationships with waifus? Do you have any sense of how they understand it?
I do, because many years ago, before I was really into anime, because the topic interested me regardless, I made myself like almost like a mini documentary where I interviewed people who consider themselves in relationships. Funny how that turns out, doesn't it? It all comes back around. But yeah, so like there's this one guy who like had like a wedding ring. There's this and like people who like go on like dates, the contents of which I'm not really sure. There's someone who I talked to who was a pastor who married people to fictional characters.
Fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, but you know.
What's weird about that?
Because it was the pastor specifically, when I talked to him, it always stuck out as the weirdest thing, because we had a really in-depth conversation about how these people think, and it was almost like a multiverse theory style of like logic, where they thought, well, I believe in a multiverse where it's in some universe they do exist. Therefore, if I just keep in mind that distance of universe, then I can tell myself it's real.
But isn't the whole point of the multiverse that that's real in that universe, but not in this one?
I don't know. I am not
Okay.
smart enough.
Sure. Okay, makes sense. I mean, anyway, so it sounds like you don't feel like you're in a relationship.
No.
And so what is your relationship? And sorry for using, I mean, I just
Yeah,
don't
it's
know
okay.
what else.
It's by like you mean like parasocial relationship is what you mean. Yeah.
No, so I mean, like, what is the way in which you relate to your waifu?
So um okay. Would you be okay with trying to phrase that in a different way? I'm not entirely sure how to
Sure.
attack that
So
question.
like when we think about relationships, so for
Yeah.
example, I can have a relationship to my plants in the backyard, even though it's
Right.
not like a relationship in terms of a consenting thing between two individuals.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
relate, so human beings, there's a theory of psychology called object relations, which is the way in which human beings relate to other things. So if
Yeah.
I, for example, if I was bitten by a snake, I will have a phobia of snakes. So I relate to snakes in a different way from the way that most people may relate to snakes. So what I'm
Okay.
curious about is what is the nature of your interaction? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Okay.
With your wife.
So one thing that's big for a lot of people, which is the same for me, is the idea of like character merchandise. So if the character is if the character is on something that you could buy, that is an immediate, you feel like you have a connection to that person. Almost like wearing like a t-shirt of a band you like. Feel like you have a stronger connection to that thing by repping that thing.
Sure.
And like it gets like to the point where it's like she has like a certain style of guitar, which I have gone and bought, sort of like a, not the exact guitar itself, but
Sure.
the style of guitar I own. My watch face is a picture of, I don't know if it came up, but my watch face, like, it's trying to find ways to rep or otherwise embody the spirit of the character in everyday life, I think.
And how do you feel as you embody your waifu?
It
How does
feels
how does it feel to you to get that guitar?
it feels like uh it's like the feeling in your heart that you get when you just have like a nice hug. It's just like just that satisfaction. That's the sort of feeling that, like, for example, I felt when I first opened up the guitar case when I got home.
So you felt enveloped.
I think that's a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. And enveloped by some kind of positive feeling.
Yeah.
What do you think you were enveloped by?
That's a very good question. I couldn't tell.
Because when I think about enveloping, I think about an agent outside of you doing something to you. Right. And maybe the agent that's creating the sensation of enveloping is the guitar. But like envelop is a verb that usually has a subject. Like,
yeah,
I enveloped someone in a hug. And so can you tell us a little bit about how you, like, how did you start the process of getting a waifu?
Yeah, so it started, technically it started many, many years ago when I watched the series for the first time. I watched about half of it, thought, and then I stopped.
Is it okay if I ask you specifics?
Yes, so
what's the series?
The series is K-On, so that's spelled K-O-N.
Okay.
And character is Yui.
Okay.
So I watched the series, like a bit of the series, many, many years ago, and I was like, yeah, all right. And then I moved on. But then throughout, let's say, I don't know how this relates to high school, but
how old were you when you watched the series?
I must have been around 15 or 16 when I very first watched it. But then from the age of around 16 into my first and second years of university, I slowly slept. I slowly went into a pretty nasty state of depression and anxiety, which I didn't really realize, and it was until it was kind of too late. I eventually went through cognitive behavioral therapy, and I'm feeling a lot better nowadays, which is nice.
Good for you, man.
And thank you. And so the way that I really got connected was back in the first year of university, when things were proper bad. I watched the show again, and it really, really, really connected with me. And,
how so?
So I do see a lot of myself in in Yui, in the character.
What do you see about yourself in her?
She is a very affectionate person with a lot of love to give to her friends, and especially at a time when you're depressed, on top of the fact that we're kind of in a society where it's weird and frowned upon as a dude to show affection and love to your friends, it can be very difficult to show that. And so it was like looking at someone who was me, but someone who wasn't tied down by anything. And that's something that I really connected with. Along with like the series itself, the overarching themes of the second season. They relate to me a lot in like being left behind and staying friends through distance, things like that. Which I have the foresight to know are things I'm going to deal with in the future. So I've sort of made that almost like a rock for me to cling on to, where it's just like I know this is how I'm going to feel. So it's almost like I can.
How do you feel about yourself, Toby?
It's a question that I would answer very differently if you asked me a year ago. At the moment, I have the highest self-esteem that I've ever had. I think on just like a visual level, I think I look pretty average on a bad day. On a good day, I think I look pretty good. In terms of like personality, I think if people give me a chance, they tend to like me, which is a nice feeling. Yeah.
Do you love yourself?
Yes, which is weird to say, but I think I do.
Yeah. When did you start to do that?
I started to do that when I stopped caring about what other people would think of me, and I did things because I loved them and I knew it would make me happy.
Who taught you how to do that?
Me.
Really?
Yeah.
It wasn't Yui?
Oh, fuck. Okay, yeah. Maybe. I'm allowed to swear, right? I can't remember.
Yeah, sure. Go for it, buddy.
I'll try not to as a general rule, but you caught me off guard.
That's what we do here. Sneak
I love
attack.
that shit.
What do you think?
That's a wonderful realization. That really is. It feels good. I don't know why, but it feels good.
What feels good about it?
When you hold a character in a regard where they're sort of like an aspiration and a motivator.
She's a perfect version of you.
Yeah, it's good to feel like you're closer to where you want to be.
When you hold a character in aspiration, how does that make you closer to where you want to be? I mean, it doesn't like, so let's say that I want to be let me just think about what's a good example. So let's say people make a lot of comparisons between me and Jordan Peterson. So let's say that I aspire to be Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
But just because I aspire to be something, I don't necessarily see that makes me closer, right? Like I can have $0 in my pocket and aspire to be a millionaire, but aspiring to be a millionaire doesn't give me $1 in my pocket.
I think what I meant was it feels good when you when you aspire to be someone and you suddenly realize that you have already taken steps to do so, and you like inspired by them and you didn't even realize it.
So they inspire you without you realizing it.
Yes.
Is that what Yui does for you?
Yes, I think so. It seems so. This is very new to me, but it very much seems so.
So can you tell us when you started to... So let's dig into that a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit? So you were depressed and anxious in university during your first 1 or 2 years. And when did your relationship with Yui start?
It must have been whilst I was still in the real thick of depression, like when it was at its height.
Sure.
Because K-On! Is about a band, which that they have music which you can download and you can listen to, and it's one of these series where it has a plot. It's called Slice of Life, where it technically has a plot, but really it's a group of characters pissing about for God knows how many episodes, just being happy. And so it was like a constant source of positivity, where if I felt like garbage, I could watch K-On! If I was out on a walk and I felt terrible, I could listen to the music. And I think through that, I started to really appreciate K-On! And the characters, and then obviously that grew.
How I'm confused. Obviously, what's off?
That's a good point. It's obvious to me. Maybe
no,
not.
Man, I think that's so far. I mean, so I like anime, and I found so I watched an anime called Hikaru no Go, and I watched it when I was like trying to get my life together, and I found something about the anime about like trying to be a better version of what you are and not letting obstacles stand in your way was like resonated deeply with me, and I also really enjoyed the music. Yeah. And I've watched it 4 or 5 times over the last maybe 10 or 15 years. And usually when I watch it, I find it to be inspiring.
Right.
And what I'm curious about is, you say obviously then that grew, and what I'm you know, I never found myself in a waifu relationship with one of the characters there.
Yeah, of course.
So I can completely I get what you mean about anime or other forms of media or stories being sources of inspiration and almost like lifeblood when things are hard.
Yeah.
It's what I'm curious about is, how does that feeling of inspiration or connectedness, or I guess connectedness maybe is one of the steps, but like resonating with like the story that someone is telling, how does that turn into romantic love and an embodiment of those things?
Okay, that's I'm on the same page now. So I think think for a second. So I think it's very, when you like, obviously when you first watch a series, it's all very like surface level up here. You think about it and you appreciate it with your mind. But I think when you take into account the fact that I did feel so far gone from normal society, and as just like a dude in university, I did have expectations of myself to sort of like be talking to girls and being in a relationship and all this kind of thing. And at that point, I hadn't felt romantic love for another person before. So when you're someone like me who really, really likes sort of affection and love, and you feel like you can't get that from the people around you, and then also you're online and you're on Twitter, and you see on, I don't know, I don't go on Reddit, but Reddit as an example, and you see people who feel like they have this romantic connection to a character. I think that something about the knowledge that that's a thing that can happen, almost as the own source of the growth of that feeling. If that makes sense.
So you realized that it's possible to romantically love.
Yeah, I realized it was
anime
possible. Yeah, and then I think through desperation and being
Hunger.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's a very good word.
What were you hungry for?
I love with all of my heart cutesy romance shit. like I'm not a
That's
man.
what you love, but what were you hungry for? What were you desperate for? I find it hard to believe. I have a difficulty envisioning someone who is desperate for cutesy stuff. I
don't, to be honest,
it feels deeper to me than that.
Yeah, it's like that is a level of it, but additionally, it's just a personal emotional connection with another person.
But that's not what. But there isn't another. So you were hungry for a connection with another person.
Yeah.
You were lonely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you feel lonely now?
Yeah, I'd say so. It comes in waves. It comes and goes.
Help us understand that a little bit.
Can I? What in what way? It feels very relatable.
I'm confused. I mean, if you have a waifu, how are you lonely?
Because it's like, as much as I can believe something up here. Oh my god! I unplugged my own headphones. That's not a good start. Sorry. As much as I can believe something up here, at the end of the day, I'm laying in my bed, and I don't like. There's no one in a mile area willing to touch me. Exactly, you know what I mean? Like, there is no affection that anyone is willing to show me. Can you speak real quick? I don't know if I can hear
Hello?
you. Okay, sorry, I can hear you. Yeah.
But you say that as much as you're in love over here, but I thought that you started by saying that this is a feeling, right? Doesn't Yui exist here? Isn't this where Yui comes from?
Yes. When like in day-to-day life, when I feel those feelings, it does come from here. But it's a very different experience, I think, when it's 4 a.m. and you're laying in bed and you feel cold and you feel about how no one's shown you affection for over a year, and it's all very much in here.
What's in here?
The emotions have been brought from here into here, and they're being inspected almost.
And what do you notice when you inspect them?
Hollow. It feels very hollow. It feels like there's no direction. It feels like there's no end game. It's just what it is, and if it grows any more, then it'll just be creating problems.
So I'm confused. Do you think? I mean, we haven't really talked judgmentally, but I'm going to ask sort of a judgmental statement. Do you think Yui is a good or a bad thing in your life? And it doesn't have to be either, but
I've thought about this. I think it isn't either, because I think in terms of being there for me when I needed that source of inspiration and motivation, it's been like a invaluable resource, making me as better as a person where I am today. But at the same time, moving forwards, it seems like a bad thing.
Why is it a bad thing?
Because I feel like if I go on, let's say, a dating app, very difficult in quarantine, surprisingly enough.
You should consider dating an anime character. They can't contract.
So when you go on like a dating app, what was the question? I've lost track.
What's bad about your wife?
Yeah, so
you said going forward, it seems like it's going to be
forwards. If you meet someone and they think, oh, hey, this Toby person's pretty cool, and then I develop feelings for that person, suddenly my heart is pulled in two ways.
Do you think it's possible to develop feelings for another person?
I have once before.
After you were with Yui?
Yes.
Or before?
After.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so it was fairly short-lived because I was it was the only time a dating app has ever even come close to working for me. It was over a year, so it was sort of like start of 2019, and I was talking to a American girl who was like an exchange student, and we went on like a few dates, and we talked a lot, and we had to break it off reasonably early because she was going to go back to America, and neither of us wanted. Funnily enough, neither of us wanted a long distance relationship. So it was just like there's no real point of us pursuing this. I mean, different people have different ideas of what dating is. In the fact that we went on some dates, yes, we were dating.
I mean, did you guys ever have a conversation about not wanting a long distance relationship?
Yeah, we did.
I think if you have that conversation, that means you're dating.
Okay.
Right? Because it's
I can see that.
It's like, I'm with you that people can think about, is it dating? Is it not dating? But if you have a conversation about, I don't think this is going to work across an ocean.
Right, yeah.
That means you're dating.
That's understandable.
And when you were with this person, help me understand why did you start on the dating app in the first place?
Because of those lonely nights where it's there are more hungry feelings beyond just having a love for a thing. Again, doing things that are
what are those hungry feelings?
Response. Response is a great one.
Yep.
The idea of telling someone how much they mean to you and them saying it back is something which I can't recall in my brain ever happening. But
you mean with Yui or with other people?
With anyone. In terms of a romantic relationship, that I don't think that's ever happened to my knowledge. At least.
Do you feel loved by people non-romantically?
Yeah, because I have a fantastic, amazing group of friends who I love with all my heart, and they're amazing. I love them.
You sound like you're a lover.
I am, as much as society tries to stop me. I am.
So my brother told me something many years ago, that there are two types of people in the world: that are lovers and fighters.
Right.
And some of us are lovers and some of us are fighters. Yeah, so it sounds like you have I was going to say a lot of love to give, but it sounds like you give your love. It's just you have a lot of love to receive.
Yeah, that can seem accurate.
Can I think for a second?
Of course.
So, Toby, what were you looking for by coming on here today?
I was looking for I think a good way of putting it is I was looking for direction, because I am here now and I don't know where I could possibly go from here. I don't know how you can make a feeling like this go away, especially when you've surrounded yourself and to an extent some of your identity around this feeling. It's difficult.
What is your identity? What kind of identity have you built up around this feeling?
If you, I'm sure there's a good number of people where if you ask them to tell you three things about me, one of those three things would be that guy really loves Yui. That sort of thing.
And how does that, when they say that, how does that make you feel?
A warm, cozy feeling.
Hmm.
I think.
What were you depressed about when you were in uni?
It's difficult to say. So, oh no, I remember now. It was so. I think it was very, 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 very similar to the Lily Pichu conversation you had about Lily 1 and Lily 2, where I had developed an extra voice in my head consistently beating me down and telling me that I wasn't being productive enough, I wasn't good enough. I like if I wanted to take a break, I wouldn't let myself, sort of thing. I would constantly berate myself, and that caused sort of like a downward spiral, I'd say.
Have you ever been in love with a real person?
Yes, the briefly with the American girl.
What about before that?
I was in a relationship and I realized I wasn't in love, and I thought, oh, I fucked this. And so I had to end it. So when the way that I think about it is how the hell I got myself into that situation was when I was 17, I was a very dumb hormonal teenager, and when someone comes along and says, "Hey, I like you," and that person plays Super Smash Bros. Melee for Nintendo GameCube, you kind of just go along with it, even against, and you will tell yourself all these kinds of things because they play Super Smash Bros. Melee and they give you affection, and you like both of those things, so this can only be a good idea. And then your work and you have nothing to do but think, and you're like, oh my god, I don't actually really like this person that much. I've made a huge, horrible mistake, and that felt pretty garbage. But
Why is that a mistake?
I felt like my long-term judgment was clouded by short-term rewards.
I see. And do you think Yui falls under that category?
That's a very good question. Perhaps, yes. It does, yeah, it was a short-term, it's a short-term solution, which
To what?
blood it to the I think to finding and being able to come into contact with who I really am, because I wasn't a very loving person when I was depressed. I was I wouldn't know if I would say I was hateful, but I certainly wasn't loving. I was not emotional at all. I suppressed all emotions. And it and it it certainly helped me realize who I'm comfortable being. But as you sort of said, the long term doesn't seem very bright.
Did I say that?
I don't know. I can't really remember. I lost track.
I don't think I said that.
Did you not say? Okay, that's a connection that I made then.
Yep.
I saw your face go when I said that, and I was like, "Oh, I think I fucked that up."
Yeah, I mean, I asked you about it, but I didn't say that.
I made that connection. Yeah.
I say very little.
Yeah.
You haven't figured out, Toby. So, Toby, let me just think for a second. Or let me think out loud for a second, okay? So I find myself actually, so my first thought is that this is not that weird.
Okay.
Right? And this is what I find is like maybe disappointing, and now I'm wondering whether, I wonder if... So my first thought is that like we talk to some quote-unquote weird people on stream. And generally speaking, what I find is that they don't tend to be as pathetic, inflammatory, or weird as we expected.
Yeah.
Like that's been a running thing. Like we get a couple of incels on who are like not true, like, fire breathing, women hating incels. They all turn out to be like relatively decent people. And then I was so excited because we were getting a real waifu. And I think you are a dude who has a real waifu. And the more that I talk to you, the more sense you make. Like, it's like, I think that, I'm going to offer a couple of explanations about what I think is going on and draw a couple of connections that I think, may offend some people. but overall, I mean, I think the way that you think about it is actually like pretty healthy. I think you were in a dark place at a particular point, and this sort of, I don't think you really understand what your mind did, but I don't think Yui is a separate person. I think Yui is you. And we can kind of hear that because you talk about identifying with Yui. You talk about who you are. Like, it's sort of like an externalization of a part of yourself. And we talk about, like, you know, you had forgotten how to love, and sort of she taught you how to do that. But then, like, also I think it's not coincidental that you learned how to love yourself through something with Yui. And you started to feel good about yourself through something with Yui. And the fact that it's like, if we think about, you know, when I think about romantic love, it's usually not with someone who's like us. So when I think about successful relationships, generally speaking, the people are quite different. And so you know, in a weird way, I think it's almost like an imaginary friend. Like, if you think about a child who has an imaginary friend, and hopefully this is not offensive to you that I'm calling Yui to a certain degree imaginary.
I understand the process, yeah.
But like, you know, sometimes the human mind anthropomorphizes or embodies a particular set of sensations and feelings, like in an external form. And this is where I'm really about to offend people, but you know, I think sometimes the way that you talk about Yui is actually the way that I hear people find religion. So like, and I'm just sharing an experience. So I'll tell you what I heard, and I'll let other people judge what they think about this. But, you know, oftentimes people find religion in dark times. And there are a lot of things that just hearing you talk, like, triggered memories in my mind of hearing people talk about religion. So like, you know, being in a dark time and like having this sort of pure in one way kind of relationship where like they pray to God and they believe in God and they idealize God, and God never really talks back, but not in the traditional way, not in the way that a normal human being does. But there is some kind of like response, right? Like, there's a sense of enveloping, complete, pure, and perfect love that you feel. And that's sometimes when I talk to people who are religious, they kind of talk about that. Now, I'm not saying that God is a waifu, so please don't interpret it that way. I'm just pointing out something similar that I've heard. And what I'd like to do is share with you actually an example about something called Pushti Marg and this guy named Vallabh Acharya. So like 1,000 years ago in India, there was a monk named Vallabh Acharya who started something called Pushti Marg. So Acharya means teacher, so he was teacher Vallabh. And a marg is a path, so it's like a path to enlightenment or a path to God. And he started, I don't know how familiar people are with Hinduism, but there are some icons or Hindu representations of God that are basically like a child. So there's baby Krishna, and like baby Krishna is like, there are different kinds of Hindu gods. And like, you know, so I shared one Durga with like someone who came on stream earlier this week. But Durga is like, she rides a tiger. She has 8 arms. She wields multiple weapons. She's not just like she's not like 2-weapon fighting. She's like 8-weapon fighting. She's got a sword and an axe and a mace. And then also like a flower and other things. And so baby Krishna is like one representation of God. And basically what Vallabh Acharya said is that we should love God the way that we love a child. So like loving a child is like a completely one-way relationship because the child never does shit for you. You change their diaper, you feed them. When they're hungry or cranky in the middle of the night, you wake up. It's actually like a super abusive relationship. It's just all one way, right? And they don't give a shit about your feelings. You know, it's just completely one way. And what he realized is that a lot of people, when they like have relationships with God, it's like a two-way street. It's like, I'm going to pray to God so that God does this for me. And I'm going to put in this so that I get this out of it. Like, it's sort of like this two-way relationship where you expect something from God. And so he kind of came up with this idea of like loving a baby. Like, so you should think about God as a child, which you can give all of your love and evokes a lot of love, but you get nothing in return. Mm. And the interesting thing is that when I read Vallabh Acharya's like stuff, when I hear you talk about your waifu, sounds bizarre, but it reminds me of his take on God, which is just sort of this idea that human beings can have a completely one-way positive relationship that is never given back. Yeah, I mean, any thoughts about that? I'm just kind of spitballing here. I have other questions for you and stuff, but
yeah. So that it sounded weird, but I see what you mean. The connection does make sense in my mind.
What makes sense about the connection?
The idea of sort of like something that's idolized and something you try to embody that is completely one way and that you never really get any actual feedback with.
Yeah. And so then the question is like, do you want to let go of Yui?
It depends what you mean by let go, I think, a bit. I have thought about what that would feel like, and it just feels like, when I think about it, it's like if I did that, then almost like a piece of me would be gone. Like I wouldn't be able to love as much as I do.
Yeah, so I don't think that that's true. I understand that you're afraid of that, but like my big hypothesis is that Yui is you, right? So like I don't think that you're gonna stop. I think there's gonna be something impure about what you replace it with, but that's life, you know. So like you have the choice between having a romantic relationship with a perfect non-existent being, or having a romantic relationship with a flawed but real being.
Yeah.
Because perfection is non-existent. Like those two things come hand in hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think you've got to move past her, to be blunt. But I don't think that she's going to leave you in the way that you think she will, because I think she's you. Like I think the kind of love that you feel for her, I think she's just like an anthropomorphized, embodied version of your perfect self. What do you think?
I think you're right.
But
my mind is searching for a but. I can't really seem to find one.
You feel a but though, right?
I feel a but around here. It's like, please find something. Please find something to repeat.
I get that but. Yeah, so what feels wrong about what I said?
It's just scary. That's all it is.
Yeah,
there is to it. It's something that I don't want to do because it's scary. But I've done scary things before, and I'll do scary things.
What are
again.
you afraid of?
That is a very good question. What am I afraid of?
Listen to this.
Yeah. Okay. I am afraid of being alone.
Good.
I think that sounds like the main one.
Absolutely. Because let's think about this for a second, right? Like, what did Yui take away from you? What did she protect you from?
The loneliness.
Absolutely. So if she goes away, right? So I think you've got kind of a, you know, it's not going to be an easy road, and it's also going to be a little bit fucking weird, to be blunt, right? So if you start dating a girl and you're like a weebo with a waifu, like that can be hard for people to accept, because I don't think many people take the time to understand it the way that you explained it. Right. Yeah. And so when she like walks into your room and she's like pictures of this plastered, like, you know, this anime girl plastered all over everything.
I have an entire bookshelf where like half of it is filled with like figurines, and it reminds me of I think it was like an old 4chan green text where someone said that they were on like Tinder and they convinced someone to come around to the house, and they walked in, saw a bunch of figurines, and then walked out.
Why do you think that people? What do you think that person is feeling when they walk into the room and they see a bunch of figurines?
That's a very good question. What would they be? They would be. What would they? 'Cause it's so normalized for me now. It's difficult to try and relate. I guess they would be under the impression that they think women are objects to an extent, right?
Maybe. So let me actually ask a different question. Why would a woman hesitate to enter into a relationship with you? Let's assume that she likes you for a moment.
Okay.
Because of the waifu thing. What makes the waifu thing hard? Real women.
Would she think that I don't have like a proper grasp on what love is?
Sure, that may be what she thinks. But I think that what would keep her from engaging in the relationship would be different. Besides thinking that you're kind of a loon, because that's how people get judged.
Yeah. I feel like you're fishing for an answer that I have. My mind's blank.
Yep. Good.
I don't have an answer.
So I think she's competing against someone that she can't win against.
Right. Okay.
Right? Because you is perfect. She's ideal. And how can a real woman with real flaws compete against that?
That is a very, very, very good observation. Because what I didn't have in my mind, which I needed, was something that my brain could process as like a real, honest to God reason as to why this isn't going to work out for me in the long term. And I think that's a very solid, like, logical reason. But like it resonates with me emotionally as well, sure, but it's something that I needed was something logical, and I think that is the helping.
Fantastic. I'm really happy to hear that. I wasn't expecting that, but I'll take it. We'll take it. I think the other thing to think about is that I'm not so sure how much space is in your heart for another person. If Yui's there, what do you think?
That I think that makes sense. I don't really have much of a memory of how that dynamic worked back when I was dating that person a year ago. So it sounds like something that would make sense, but it's something. So
did you have a waifu a year ago?
Yes.
And what did that person think?
I didn't say anything. It's a bit like a death sentence, isn't it? Or would you,
yeah, man.
Like you're in a relationship, you're expected to be honest, but I mean, like that's a hell of a sit down moment where it's like it's easier in my experience.
It's one thing to have a sit down in a phone moment and tell someone that you've been having an affair and that they're the second woman. And it's an entirely different level of sit down moment when the person that you're cheating on is non-existent.
Yeah, it's a hard sell.
Yeah, it's kind of the essence of an emotional affair without a physical affair. It's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think I have all kinds of other questions. So have you been judged for having a waifu?
I tend to surround myself with people who I think are quite nice, and so even if they don't really understand what the hell's going on, they're not judgmental. Or I have friends who are in sort of like the sphere of people who like are in the anime community and understand everything, so it's not weird to them.
Is weebo offensive?
So weebo isn't actually a word. So there's weeb and there's weaboo. Weaboo is kind of like the long-winded, a little out-of-date version. Weeb is usually the shortened.
What is a weeb?
A weeb would just be someone who really, really likes anime, and like the stereotype would be like unwashed, smelly, bad sense of dress, bad social skills.
Are you a weeb?
In spirit, yes, but in physicality, no. I work out. I work out and dress myself nicely and bathe with the best of them. But in mentally, I feel like I'm a dirty weeb.
Good for you, man. I applaud that. That makes me happy and optimistic for you. So it sounds like you've kind of surrounded by yourself by weebs.
Yeah, I have a good number of weeb friends. Yeah.
Okay, and what are you up to nowadays? Are you still in uni or?
Yeah, I'm just finishing up uni now. I'm
Good for
like
you, man.
by April 30th, I should have everything submitted. Thank God for quarantine, because holy hell, our project was going downhill. We got saved by the pandemic, if anything.
Interesting. And what are you going to do after uni?
I'm going to change careers, because if uni's good at anything, it's telling you what you don't like, and I do not like the course I took. So I'm planning on. Well, I'm planning, but I've already made a bunch of work towards having a career in teaching English abroad.
Okay.
So I've already
Japan?
gone up. Yeah, that's one on my list. Also Mongolia, because no one's been to Mongolia. I just want to go and like check in on them, see what's up. So it's just kind of I don't know. No one talks about Mongolia. It's huge.
Yeah.
I've never met anyone from Mongolia, but it's like 3 times the size of this country.
Wow.
I don't get it, but yeah, I want to go to Mongolia at some point. It's
okay.
Big
I mean,
plans.
I guess we could have seen the teaching English abroad thing coming, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's immediately this like the stereotypical career choice for people.
So it sounds like you haven't dealt with a whole lot of bullying around this kind of thing.
Around this kind of thing, no, I wouldn't think so.
That's surprising. But you have been bullied for other things?
I mean, yeah, sure. I grew up, didn't I? Everyone gets bullied for things.
What was your childhood like?
It was very, very emotionally repressed. Like growing up through school, I had very long, hideous looking hair. And you can still see it a bit now, but like especially back then, acne was a huge problem for me. So I was the sort of kid that it would just kind of like your eyes would water just looking at me. It was like it was not a good look. So
you're laughing, but that doesn't sound very funny.
I think but like I think if I saw myself now, I wouldn't want to look at myself. I think I it's quite lighthearted now, because I know that I'm in a good place now, and like that seems so far away. Like I've changed so much as a human being from then. It's difficult to just relate to myself.
How did you change?
So I think the biggest changing point for my life was when my friends introduced me to competitive gaming, because it was the first time I ever tried anything, basically, and it was the first time I was ever I was like self-reflective, and that process of looking at yourself and improving yourself, it was like I woke up for the first time, like coming out the Matrix. It was like I was just stumbling through life before that, and suddenly I felt like a human
coming
being.
Out of the Matrix comes before getting a waifu. Some next level shit, man.
Yeah.
When did you get introduced into competitive gaming?
So we started off with we didn't take it too seriously, but we started off with like 6v6 TF2. And then we transitioned into Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is more of like a 1v1 fighter. And I played that for a good amount of years. And then that's what introduced me big time to like making content on the internet. I had like a small like around 500 subscribers, like following of like making Smash videos. Cool, but because of how the community is, and how small it is, like even though I only had 500 subscribers, it would be the kind of thing where like I could go to a tournament and I would be like recognized, which was
internet famous, buddy.
It was so weird. It's like a wake up call that I don't like fame. It's like I think fame is for some people, not for me. I don't like the idea of being recognized much.
Yeah, it was. I still remember the first time someone recognized me on the street. So this is like recent. So I just started streaming a few months ago. But then someone, like literally, I was walking down the street to a coffee shop, and someone looked at me and pointed at me and said, "You're Dr. K." And then they just stood there, and I was like, yes. And then I didn't know what I was supposed to say or do, because I didn't know who they were. It's like, normally it's like, hey, how are you? And then you say fine, and you say, how are you? And then I was like, and you're some guy on the street. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Toby, yeah, dude, I don't think, I mean, I find myself having other questions, right? Like, so you know, like, I'm really curious, because for people who think that they're in relationships, I understand that there's like a sexual component to that. I'm not getting that from you. Is that the case?
I mean, I jerk off like any other weeb. It's just what it is. There's nothing weird. Some people are like monogamous in that sense, where they will only do that kind of thing to that one character. That's not how I roll. That's not what I do.
Okay. So you're an equal opportunity employer for all of the projects.
Sure, you can put it like that.
Yeah.
In the perhaps the worst way I've ever heard that, but yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
So I mean, but like, dude, I don't know what to say. Like, you know, it sounds to me like this was a pretty. I know this is gonna sound fucking weird, but it's like, it makes sense to me. You know, like, I think the story you told about sort of being in a dark point in your life and watching something that resonates with you, like, that's how human beings work.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so we have stories, and we resonate with stories, and we find inspiration from characters. And I think something about the way that you were, and we haven't really dug too much into this, but I wonder whether you had other risk factors or vulnerabilities for really like anthropomorphizing like this feeling. I think the really, really bizarre thing is that, you know, one of the questions that I get very often from people from our community is, how do I learn to forgive myself or love myself? And apparently the answer is get a waifu. You know, so I think it's quite remarkable. I mean, the one thing that I think really sets you apart, Toby, from most of the people that I've met is not actually the fact that you have a waifu. It's fucking bizarre. But it's the fact that you actually sound like you love yourself, and that you're confident in who you are, despite having a waifu. So that may sound like super weird, because the idea is that, you know, people lack... I think it sort of makes sense that loneliness and a lack of confidence leads people to create waifus or engage with waifus. But I think even... And, you know, it sounds strange to me that, like, you know, you think that you need to move past this. And that was like, you had that in your head from the get-go. Yeah. And I get that you're scared, and because you are scared. So I think, you know, you're like an adult version of a child who has like a safety blanket. And this is what object relations is a lot about. Like, so the theory of object relations, which is a subset of something called psychoanalysis, basically talks about how adults have safety blankets too. Like, we all have all kinds of things, and in some case, you know, there are books that have been written about object relations and God, and so like God is a safety blanket of sorts, and you know, I think that you should. I mean, if I tell you that I think it's time to let her go, how do you respond to
that? Fear.
Yeah. So, and then I would say to that fear, you know, I think she's always going to be with you. And in a sense, and this is very anime, right? So she's like changed you as a person. And even though she has to die at the end of the arc or disappear, it doesn't, you live on, and she lives on in here.
Yeah.
And then
the moment in the anime where the character appears in the clouds.
Absolutely. So that's what that's where she's got to go, man. She's got to appear in the clouds, and you've got to make space for, like, you know, a flesh and blood person, because there's a part of you that's hungry for that, right? And I find myself saying thankfully, which is a little bit judgmental, but thankfully you recognize that you can't have a real relationship with her, which I'm still open-minded, and if someone were to say, yeah, I am capable of having a real relationship with her, I'd be happy to explore that with them, but I just don't understand that. And so far you haven't really given me anything to suggest that that's truly possible. I think you can have a relationship, but it's not a two-sided relationship. You can have a relationship in the way that you can have with God, in which it's like pretty one-sided, which in a sense I don't even really believe, but that's a different issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like my relationship with God is two-sided. Anyway. But yeah, I mean, what do you think about that?
I like that as a conclusion. I think it's almost like it satisfies all areas where it's able to take the almost like the present of the emotion, as in as a space and time, not a gift wrap thing, and able to carpent. No, that's not a word. Able to put it somewhere else, like just in like my memory, be like that was a thing, but the effect and the emotion, not the emotion, the effect it has had on me sticks with me. It's not like I don't lose the progress I've made.
Absolutely. And I even would disagree with a little bit about your conception of like walling it off and it
Right,
being in
yeah.
your memory. I think you'll find, and this has been my experience of love in a romantic and also with like other human beings in a different way relationship, that love is going to be way more present than you realize.
Right.
Because I still think that she's more of you than you realize. Like she's not quite as like she's not external to begin with in my mind, but in your mind she's external in some way. But I think she's more internal than you're giving her credit for. And so I think if you end up in a loving relationship with someone, you'll be surprised by how present she is. And then the last very practical thing is I think psychologically and also like from a weirdness standpoint, you've got to make space in your life for someone else.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like it's not fair to that person for her to compete with Yui because that person is going to have bad days and Yui's not.
Yeah.
Although I hear that some people's waifus throw temper tantrums and things like that.
I've never heard of that before in my life.
Yeah, so I mean, this isn't my first swim into these waters, but when I say I've heard, I've worked with people who have told me that before.
Right.
But for them, it seems to be like a big important part of them to be able to win over their waifu after they're mad at this person. Anyway, so it's weird. But thoughts or questions before we kind of wrap up?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty good.
Can you just help me understand a little bit about like what felt relevant to you or what was helpful from today?
Okay. I think really defining how as a relationship it worked. The discussing the one-sided nature of it really helped. The exploring how it related, or exploring how much Yui and myself are intertwined helped a lot. And and I think that specifically the sort of I don't know how I would describe it, but the anime head in the clouds moment specifically as well.
Yeah. So would you like to yeah, so I thanks for sharing that. Like can I share with you kind of my summary of what I learned today and
Yep, of course.
maybe like direct. So I mean, first of all, I think that you did an awesome job of explaining like what a waifu is, right? So
Yeah.
the most important thing I think is that it's a feeling of love. And the interesting thing is that so people can say that waifus are real or fake or whatever, relationship not relationship, but one of the things that I've come to appreciate is that feelings are real. And it doesn't matter whether feelings come from fake places. Feelings themselves are real and have to be addressed. Like when I'm working with someone with anxiety, and even though everyone doesn't actually hate them, they feel hated by other people because that's what happens when you're anxious.
Yeah.
And it doesn't do any good to tell them, oh, by the way, no one actually hates you. That doesn't do anything to the feeling. The feeling is real and needs to be dealt with. Like it needs to be considered. And so you had convinced me that waifus are quote unquote real and not weird from the second that your defining point, and you did this right at the get-go, is that it's a feeling of romantic love towards something that doesn't exist. And so feelings towards things that don't exist happen all the time, right? And now by don't exist, I mean that you can define or prove, like for example, God. So a lot of people have faith in God and there's no real proof of God. Some people think there's proof. I'm not convinced of that. But so at the end of the day, it's a feeling. And I think that, you know, you watched K-On! First when you were like 15 or 16 years old, and it was kind of surface level. But as you started to struggle in life, you kind of went towards, you know, something about Yui's story resonated with you. You saw yourself in her. She was kind of like, I still think that you kind of conceive of her as a perfect version of you. And that kind of comes down to this idea of like being capable of love and loving other people. And it sounds like she was able to do that in the anime. Maybe you also want to make music. And then, you know, I think that like what's happened is that helped you when you were feeling alone and loathing yourself, because you kind of talked about having that self-loathing or that critical voice. Whereas like Yui sort of gave you a sense of love and acceptance. And that's when you learned how to love yourself. Which is a very important thing to learn how to do. And now that you've sort of learned that and things are kind of status quo, you're growing and you're changing and you're dating women and being unfaithful towards Yui. And now you're kind of noticing that like there's something left that's like unsatisfied, right? That at the end of the day, you still have a hunger for, you know, for something that can love you back. And you can love yourself, but like that's different from being loved by someone. And I think what you're starting to feel more and more is that like, even though you feel good about yourself and you love yourself, that's not the same as someone loving you. And if you really want that, I think you've got to sort of, not so much like, you know, as Yui like goes into the clouds, she doesn't disappear, right? She just becomes less present and manifest in your physical world. So like the shelf of things that you have, I think needs to come down at some point, right? Not like, I mean, I think it's fine to have one picture, but like think about it in the way that, you know, you're grieving the loss of a relationship, right? That person doesn't leave your life entirely, but they're also like, you know, they get kind of packaged and set aside. And I want you to kind of think about it almost like, you know, if I have a wife who passes away, and thank God, hopefully that's not going to happen anytime soon, but, you know, like, and I start dating someone new, like it's fine, like it's completely reasonable for me to have an entire bookshelf filled with pictures of my wife. And at the same time, if I try to let someone else in, like I see this practically with patients that I work with, is like, they can't compete against a dead person.
Yeah.
Right? It's just not like, because everything that I remember about my deceased wife, or everything that my patients remember about their deceased wife, is idealized just like Yui is. And it doesn't mean that the feelings that I have for that person are false. It's just not fair to the person that you want to let into your life. And I think that's really the direction that you need to go in terms of, you know, grieve that this part of your life is over, but also that there's like a second arc. So now we're like in Toby arc 2, which is when he gets a real girlfriend.
Yeah. What an arc that'll be.
Yeah. So you got to report back at some point, right? And let us know how that's going. And you, I mean, it's great that you do kind of take care of yourself. And I think you're ready to start letting her go. Although I get that you're scared, because that's normal. So the part of you that's scared is like the part of you that's like a freshman and not someone who's graduating. And I mean, you're going to go to Japan and teach English, and you're probably going to want to date an Asian chick. And so like, you know, you gotta make space for that in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that entire thing was like pretty much spot on. It's like something for me to just like save and remember on occasions. Like, oh yeah, what am I supposed to be doing? Oh yeah, that's makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and so good luck to you, man.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
You feel like meditating today?
I've tried, because I've had therapy before, and we tried meditating, but my brain doesn't like to stop, so it's very difficult to start. I feel like I'd never get anywhere.
Okay.
When I try.
You willing to give it a shot?
I'll be willing to give it a shot.
Okay, so we won't expect much from you, okay? And so, unfortunately for the people at home, I don't know how much this is going to apply to y'all, because we're going to try to do a different sort of meditation. So I want you to sit up straight.
Yep.
And Thank you for sharing your concerns, by the way. So we're going to try to do something different. I'm not going to teach you a traditional meditation. Close your eyes and try to find the feeling of love that you have for Yui. Can you find it?
Yep.
Where is it?
About here.
Okay. What does it feel like?
It feels after today, it's halfway between warm and comforting and a little cold and clinical and sort of taken apart a little bit.
Okay. And so interesting. It's not an answer I was expecting, so I got to just think about that for a second. So let's just start by noticing those two. So is the cold and clinical coming from your chest, or is it coming from somewhere else?
It's like the cold and clinical is here, and the warmth is like here, just next to it.
Okay. So good. So in a sense, I want you to sit with that. I want to know, do you feel like you've lost something by feeling the cold and clinical?
No.
But didn't it all used to be warm and fuzzy?
Yeah.
How have you not lost something by gaining something cold and clinical?
Because it's still there, it's just under a different light.
Beautifully put. And so now I want you to recognize, try to find the fear of letting Yui go.
Okay.
Where is that?
It's up here.
Okay, and what does that feel like?
It feels a little bit empty and a little bit like, this is gonna sound really weird. It feels like a chain, like a metal chain, just being like dragged across a paving.
Sure. Beautifully put. Right, so notice that thing. There's heaviness to it, there's weight to it, there's noise to it. There's a sense of holding you down or weighing you down, holding you back. Like that's what when I hear you use that language, that's what pops into my mind. What does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think so.
And so that's kind of a strange imagery because now I want you to think a little bit about all of the places that Yui is in your room and in your life in a physical way. And I want you to think about, let's start with the bookshelf. What would it feel like to take some of those things and pack them away in a shoebox?
That would feel very sad.
Sad in what way?
That would feel like I'm losing a part of myself.
Okay. So, what are you feeling now?
Like my entire body's very slightly lifting upwards, like I'm full of helium or something.
Okay.
Like everything's gone to my head a little bit.
Okay. So you feel like you would lose a part of yourself?
Yeah.
Not a part of her?
It feels very personal.
Yeah. So what would you be losing by doing that? What part of yourself would you give up?
I think I don't know exactly what I mean by this, but the word memories comes to mind.
Yeah. I think that's a good answer. Let me just think about how to explain that. I think that you're giving up that which was very important to you before, right? That's why it's a memory. You're giving up the sense of comfort that you needed then, but you're not the same person anymore. So at this point, you're spot on that you're giving up a memory because it's of the past now, which is exactly why you must put it away. And the other thing that I want you to try to appreciate for a moment is like, where are all of these things? So now I want you to take a step back a little bit and now really observe instead of sit in the feelings like you have been. And where are all of these feelings coming from?
The memories feelings.
Okay. And where do your memories come from?
No, so I'm asking specifically, do you mean the memories?
Everything that we've talked about, every question that I've asked you, all the answers that you've given me, where do those answers come from?
From up here.
Okay. I'm not so sure I agree with that. Right? Because some information and data is coming from here. Right. So I agree that the answer, the words out of your mouth are maybe coming from here, but you're getting data from here.
Yeah.
But now let me ask you this. Are you getting any data from the outside?
No.
Right. So now I want you to take some comfort in that. Because you can put the pictures away, but nothing is coming from the pictures. Like nothing is coming from the pictures, the watch. All of the pictures trigger something in here. Do you see that? But like it's all coming from here. And so you can take every image of Yui out of your house, stop freaking out prospective girlfriends, and you don't actually have to let go of any of that because it's all in here anyway. Like this is where all your feelings and sensations and stuff comes from. This is where the sadness and the grief and the coldness and the clinicalness and the warmth and the love and also the comfort of needing those feelings and that representation, it all comes from here. And you can let it go. I think it requires courage. And to put things very, very concretely and to freak you out, Toby, I rarely do this, but I am going to ask you to try to put some of those things away.
Okay.
Right? Between now and tomorrow. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. No big deal.
I do need to make a quick disclaimer to say that I'm still at university. I'm not at home. So many of the things that I own aren't here. So I can do some things, but some things will require me breaking the law if I were to put them away.
No. I mean, I'm not saying you should break the law, but you're basically giving me an excuse for avoiding the task. So be it.
Yeah. I mean, I can do what I can around here, but
but I'm not asking you to put everything away. The real reason that I want you to put it away is not to put it away, but to take a snapshot of who you are now and the thought of putting things away and see how you feel, and then actually go through the act of packing something away. And then notice how you feel afterward. Do you feel like you've lost something? Because the issue here is that right now you is 100% a part of your life. So if we make her 90% a part of your life, how devastating is that?
Yeah.
And what I think you'll discover is that something about that chain dragging across pavement is not going to be exactly what you think it is. It's going to be painful in some ways that you may not have realized, and I think it's going to be easier in other ways that you don't realize. And it is kind of interesting because you use this imagery of shackling, and I think that's exactly what Yui is doing for you now. She helped you up, and now she's kind of holding you back, and I get the sense that you feel that. So now it's time to let her go, which can be scary. Good luck to you, man.
Thank you very much.
And if you can think of anyone, any questions about any of that stuff?
Sorry, say that again, you slightly cut out.
Any questions about any of that stuff?
No.
Okay.
I think we're good. Yeah.
And if you've got a real flaming weebo who's got a relationship and wants to come on stream, because you're like halfway past all this shit already, man. It's disappointing. Like we were looking for a real.
I hope chat doesn't feel debated yet again.
Yeah, they were debated, man. You bathe and you work out and you're making a career change and you take care of yourself and it sounds like you've dated.
The monitor.
You've dated a couple of women despite having we want like a real weebo, man, like a real waifu, like some guy who has shit plastered up. You have like a Bowser poster on your wall. Like that should be someone else. Come on, man.
Well, I do have a Yui up there.
Do we get to see Yui before we go?
Yeah, sure. It's one that my friend drew for me for Christmas. And it's Yui holding a Snom, which is a Pokemon.
Oh wow! Can you? Yeah, there we go. Okay.
Oh. But yeah, so I'm
cool.
Very much proud of my Bowser Super Mario 64 Bowser poster. Fucking love that so much.
It's a great game. It's probably my favorite Mario.
Oh, my favorite Mario easily. So good.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, dude. Take care. Good luck.
Okay, you too.
Let her go, buddy.
I'll try. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So let's do. Okay, we've got. So many people love Toby. Ethan Pog. Okay, so let's do. You guys want to do a couple of questions? Okay, let's do a couple of questions. Thanks for persevering through all of the boomerness.
Way.
Ready to roll. Hello? I'm alone in Discord. So much loneliness. Forever alone. Maybe it's time to dig myself up a waifu. Do weebo girls have husbandoos?
Okay. Hey.
Hey. What's up, man?
So, before I really ask the question, I wanted to talk about something that happened a year ago.
Okay.
So, in March of 2019, we had a big house fire. So, I was home alone in my room, which I'm there right now. And the fire alarm went off and the house was on fire. And I had to get the fuck out. And
Sounds
so...
scary.
Yeah, so that I was really stressed on that day, and it was in the middle of my exam week, so all sorts of stuff going on. But what's weird is the week after that, after I finished the exams, I felt really free. Like I didn't have to go home because I didn't have a home, right? Well, we stayed somewhere, but it wasn't home. And so when I was out, I didn't feel like I had to get back home, right? So I felt free. So I've thought about that a lot, and I felt like it had to do with my fear of rejection. Like when I'm out, I feel like I'm afraid of getting rejected, and so when I'm home, I'm safe from that. So my question would be, how do I deal with that, or how do I feel less attached to home? Yeah.
I'm confused because what it sounds like what you're giving me is an answer, not a question.
Yeah. So, well, of course, another question could be, how do I deal with fear of rejection?
No, but I mean, I understand that you can rephrase the question and you're turning it into a question. I think what the weird thing here is I think you already have an answer, right? So like you've already analyzed something. So this is great. I'm not trying to shoot you down, but the interesting thing is that most people come to me. Like what it sounds like what you've had is a realization. What we're really looking for me to do is confirm your realization. That home is a place that allows you to escape from your fear of rejection. It's a protective place. And what you discovered when your house burned down is that someone taking away your shelter, like actually things were not as scary as you thought they were in the outside world. And you felt free and good. Right? Like what I'm hearing from you is almost like so I have young kids. So sometimes a young child doesn't want to do something. They're terrified. Like let's say like I want to put one of them in the bathtub and they're scared of the water. And it's almost like you have to force them into the bathtub. And once you force them into the bathtub, they're like, hey, this is actually a lot of fun. It's not what I thought it was. And so what I'm hearing from you is that you were afraid of rejection. So you had an experience of freedom after your house burned down, which is strange. And then as you reflected on it and looked into it, you realized, oh, like I was using home as a shield against like fear of rejection. And you started to understand that for yourself, which is wonderful. And then you also realize like, oh, actually like coming out from behind the shield actually feels freeing and liberating.
Yeah. So the problem, I guess, is that a week later when we got a rental home and, you know, you start getting settled in there, you move all your stuff that's still intact. And then it just came back. Right? I still wanted to go home. And
yeah, of course.
I still have that. And now, of course, now I'm really stuck at home, but yeah.
So I mean, I think that the issue is that like what you've got to do is just recognize that. So now that you've got a shelter again, it can be scary, even though you've been in the bathtub once and you enjoyed it the first time. It can be hard for someone to overcome their fear after one experience that's positive. But the short answer is, and I recognize this is, you know, COVID, so you can't do this, is like, I think you already know that you need to leave the home more. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
And so you know that, you know, there's a part of you that's not going to want to leave. And there's a part of you that recognizes that that's exactly what you need. Because you came here and you told me, this is what I need to do. This is what home means to me. How do I deal with my fear of rejection? And so you could say that, okay, yeah, you have to go back and process and figure out why you're afraid of being rejected. But I think in your case, you have a unique advantage in the sense that you've been forced to overcome your fear of rejection. And you found that it's actually not very painful. And so I'd say just leave the house when it's time to. And notice that you have the fear of rejection. And notice that there's a part of you that can tell, that can assure you that that fear of rejection is not correct. That you've actually been out of the house before. And it turns out to be freeing and liberating. And then you're going to have a little war in your mind. Because a part of you is going to say, I want safety. And another part of you is going to say, I want liberation. And then it's your choice which part of your mind you listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And like, this is all kind of a moot question because you're in COVID. Like, I'm sorry if I don't have a more satisfying answer, but you're one of the rare people that like starts their question with an answer. That's the answer. So, I mean, it's different. It's not just telling people like, oh, just leave your house. Like the difference between telling someone to leave their house and telling you to leave your house is that you've left your house before. So there's some part of you that you can rely on to help you get out of your house.
Yeah. So in a sense, it has helped. And I've like started going out more with friends. But then the next level kind of above that is asking a girl out, right? And that's still so terrifying to me. And yeah, I don't know.
I don't understand why you didn't start with that one. Right? So
okay,
like,
I guess that's a good point.
It's like if you're able to go out with friends and you ask me like, how do I leave the house? Then
yeah.
And then if you know, I mean, like if your thing is like, I'm terrified of being rejected by a girl, then, you know, that's different. But I mean, I think we've got we've got a few minutes left, and unfortunately, I don't know.
Yeah,
let me see if we have another question. Because I kind of want to say, like, that's the question we should answer. But there's another part of me that's like, if there are other people waiting, I should give them a chance too. Right?
Yeah, totally. And of course, I already know that the answer is just ask, right? So
No. But see, you haven't asked yet. So it's not just ask for you. You see the difference? One is that, like, you've left the home. So you have an experience of a thing. Right? So you can rely on that experience to help you overcome your fear. But if you've never had an experience of the thing, you can't just tell someone to just do it. Do you understand the difference there?
Right, yeah.
Just do it is usually the wrong answer. You're one of the rare people for whom it's the right answer because you already learned this.
Okay.
Right? Like, if you are afraid of asking out a girl, get yourself a waifu, learn some self-love, and then go and ask out a girl. Because then you'll have been in a relationship before.
I know you're kind of memeing now, but...
Yeah, I'm memeing. Let me check in with Moses and see if we have another question.
Yeah, sure.
And then if not, then we'll Okay, hold on. Let me just hold on a second. Don't leave yet, okay? Hey, do we have another question or?
There's 2 more. How many do you want?
Let's do.
Yeah,
oh, okay. I guess let's do one more. Okay. So, yeah, we have a couple of questions. So I'm gonna have to ask. Let them do their thing. Okay. All right. What's up?
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. So my question would be rather personal, and it is regarding the feeling of God you were talking about,
Sure.
and it being feeling sometimes like two-sided relationship where you give and you get something out of it. Could you elaborate a little more on this experience?
So what is my experience of a two-sided relationship with God?
So in the stream, you, in the short section, I don't know about what time frame it was.
Yeah.
But you talked about some, or maybe I did misunderstand you there.
No. I was clarifying what your question was. So I made a statement about sometimes having a bizarre two-sided relationship with God, right? Where I give and I receive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so your question is, can I elaborate on that?
Yes, like how does
that
yeah, how does it work? How does a relationship that became one-sided turn into a two-sided relationship, I guess? Or
so I think there are 2 aspects to it. The first is that sometimes when I know I'm supposed to do something, so let's just take a step back. So the first thing is what's the deal with God? So I tend to be skeptical by nature, and I think that I have yet to read a logical proof or a scientific piece of evidence that convinces me that God exists. You with me so far?
Yep.
So I understand that people debate that kind of thing. And in my own experiences with theism versus non-theism, which I think Hinduism, I like Hinduism because Hinduism is a religion that is simultaneously polytheistic, monotheistic, and atheistic. So their conception of God just fits way better with me. Because they don't think that there's a difference between monotheism and atheism. Which I know sounds different because we define the words differently, but they define God in a way that sort of you can apply monotheism and atheism to it in the same way. And the simplest analogy I can give is you can say that H2O is a liquid, a solid, or a gas. And of course that makes sense because we understand. But if I were to tell you that ice and water are different, but they're both H2O, right? That sort of makes sense. In one perspective, these 2 things are different, but from another perspective, they're the same. And so Western religion or Western philosophy tends to look at atheism and monotheism as contradictory, whereas Eastern philosophy does not. It's it's all H2O.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so your question is what's the deal with my two-way relationship with God? So there are 2 things. The first is that I started to, through meditation, discover sources of knowledge that I do not think were from me. So we have this conception that all of the knowledge that we get, or all of the understanding that we get, comes from us. So if I read a math textbook and there's information in the math textbook, and that the understanding comes from me. But as I started to understand who I was, I started to recognize that I'm knowing things that is not possible for a human to know. I started to believe
not possible that. In what sense?
So I'll just give you an example. So one time I had someone come into my office and say to me, "I've heard that you're the guy that people should talk to." So she sat down in my office and then she said, "So you're the guy that fixes people's lives, right? So she sat down in my office and she said, "So fix mine." And then I was like, my first instinct was like, I don't know anything about this person. And then I just like stopped for a second. I meditated and I started talking. And then 30 minutes later, she's crying in my office and saying, "I've talked to half a dozen therapists and like none of them have ever been as helpful as this is." And then 20 minutes later, she walked out of my office and I have never seen her again. Now, from a scientific perspective, you could say that my training in human psychology allows me to talk to another human being and read signals from them and essentially do like cold reading, which is what psychics do, and essentially like train myself to be able to do that. You could say that that is a skill that human beings can acquire. That a mastery in psychology and cold reading allows someone to sit across from another human being and like understand them in a way that's like helpful and transformative for that person. Does that make sense? Do you know what cold reading is?
No, it didn't.
It's basically a technique that psychics use.
Okay.
Right? So, but then like the more I stop and think about it, like I don't think I'm that good at psychology. And so like when I have experiences like that, it makes me like really scratch my head and say, am I just that badass? And I'm pretty sure I'm not, because like I sort of know what I'm capable of. And I know that I'm not capable of that. Like if you take 100 people and you stick them in front of me and you say like, oh, like analyze, like I can't do, that's not possible, right? That's just not possible. Like I don't believe that that's possible. So then if I'm not capable of doing that, but that clearly happened, then like where is that coming from? So that's so like I don't know what that thing is, but I have trouble accepting that that was me, and I have trouble accepting that that didn't happen. So I accept that that happened, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't me because I'm pretty sure I know what I'm capable of. And so that's one, it's an anecdote, absolutely, right? So like that gets me questioning though. I'm not saying it's evidence. I'm just saying like this is fucking confusing for me. And then you guys are asking about my personal experiences, which I'm not claiming to have knowledge of this kind of stuff. It's just like you're asking for my subjective experience, and this is what I'm sharing with you. I'm not saying I'm right. If you guys say I'm fucking dumb, or I'm fucking amazing, or I hallucinated it, I will accept all those things. I've thought about that stuff. It still kind of is in my mind as possibilities. Then the other thing that happened, and this is going to sound really weird, but sometimes I do things that I know I'm not supposed to do, and I feel like I just get bitch slapped by God. It's hard to describe. But like sometimes when I lose patience with my kids, like I get hurt in some way. It's just really strange. Like weird things will happen around me. And like there's a part of me that says, oh, this is just your mind reading into cognitive bias around like, and there's like definitely like an availability bias. Like I get mad at my kid like a dozen times, but the only times that I remember are the ones that something happens to me. So I'm aware of that cognitive bias and I kind of look out for it. I'm not saying that this is actually the case. Like I think that scientifically, if someone came to my office and said, I think this is happening, I would say to them, you know, there's a decent chance this is availability bias. So you're misremembering certain things. But like just the simplest thing that I can tell you is like, I forgot even what it was. I was outside and I got mad at my kid in a way that I knew I shouldn't have. And like something, like a bug flew into my eye within the next few seconds. And it was just weird. It was just like really, really weird. And that's happened to me a few times. And so like, is that availability bias? Like literally like a bug flew into my eye and like hurt the shit out of my eye. I was like, what the fuck? It's just strange. Like is it bias? Like absolutely. Like it should be bias, right? This is just me misremembering because I get mad at my kid every day. It's just me misremembering. But then there's a part of myself, there's like a part of me that feels like it's not misremembering. It's like, actually, like maybe you should pay attention to this. And so I don't know what's real and what isn't, but like it makes me question.
And okay. Yeah, makes sense. And then kind of paying attention more or recognizing such experiences, feelings.
Yeah, so I really don't know what the deal is there. Like, is it just cognitive bias? So now I pay attention, right? I pay attention to every time I get mad at my kid. And I like, in my mind, I sort of have like a mental tally. And like I try to keep track. Like I actually study it. Like I collect data. And so far I haven't come to any conclusions. Sorry to say.
Like,
so is it cognitive bias? Like absolutely could be. Like that sounds sure as hell sounds like cognitive bias and the availability bias, right? Like I'm misremembering things, but it feels different. And one thing that I've come to appreciate is that just because something doesn't make sense in my head doesn't mean it's incorrect. And in fact, humanity's biggest advancements have come from things that don't make sense to people. I don't know if that so for example, when Einstein discovered relativity, he started questioning the fixed nature of time, which is so non-intuitive. So I've come to appreciate that like if I want to really learn things, it's questioning things that I hold to be absolutely true. And so anytime I get data that contradicts something that I hold to be absolutely true, like that there isn't a God, then I stop and pause and I really try to study it. Does that make sense?
The Einstein part was a bit too complex to grasp from my mind.
So the point behind the Einstein part is that Einstein questioned some things that everyone knew to be true.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right? So like when I have a belief that, for example, like I don't believe that God bitch slaps me when I'm mean to my kid. Like that just doesn't... There is not good evidence in the world that God responds to evil in a direct way.
So even if we think something is wrong, we could be ourselves wrong about being wrong.
Absolutely. So that's what I've come to realize. Okay. And so that's made me re-question and like put a question mark into like, what's the deal with God? Because evil happens all over the place. So it just doesn't make sense to me that there are like people committing genocide and God has the time or inclination to send a fly into my eye when I'm mean to my kid. Like that just doesn't make any logical sense. Right?
Yeah. No.
But at the same time, like flies keep on winding up in my eye. So like, what the fuck is up with that? And that's where I am. Which is like, it's just too weird. It's like too coincidental. Because flies keep on winding up in my eye. And like, that's just weird. So I haven't figured it out, but I'm looking into it and trying to figure it out.
Like an experiment that's still running and needs
more absolutely. Data. And if you have any thoughts about how this shit works, by all means, or Twitch chat does, like I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I think I'm at that point too at the moment. Can't say I figured anything out on that domain.
Yeah.
So thank you for your question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, man.
Very happy.
I'm sorry if I was like not, unfortunately I don't have enlightened answers for everything that you guys ask, but I'm happy to answer them.
I mean, it's kind of the discussion part about it, which makes me think getting there.
Yeah, so one thing that I would leave for you is like, don't let logic outweigh experience. So this is something I feel really confident. Maybe this is what I should have said all along. Is that I've come to appreciate that the conclusions of a logical mind are not the only source of information, and sometimes are actually completely useless. Like the case with anxiety. Like if you've got anxiety, it doesn't matter. Like if you take someone with OCD who has a part of their brain that tells them, unless you turn off and on the light 7 times, a meteor is going to hit your parents. It doesn't matter how illogical the thought is. Like there are forces within you that act upon you, or potentially in the outside world, that don't adhere to logic.
And the people influenced kind of then start acting like it's real in a way.
Yeah, so like I think
because
that just
experience is real to them.
Absolutely. So I think that this is where like a lot of people say, oh, this is not logical, therefore I should not believe it. But I think that there are all kinds of things that you can believe that exist outside of logic, and there's sources of information that come outside of logic. And so if you have an experience of something, don't just discard it because it's illogical.
Is that where meditation and yoga comes in?
For me, absolutely, because meditation is where I learned truths that were not founded in logic.
and rather through experience, I guess.
Yeah, so meditation is about cultivating experience. Right? So like I'll just give you one last example and then we have to transition, I think, because we've got Ethan. But so like some people have asked me about past lives. So the way that I understand past lives is like you have memories of your past, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like what would you do one day if you woke up and in the same way, like you remember what you had for lunch yesterday?
No.
Okay.
Moment.
So you can take any memory, like your memories are like normal, right? Like they're just a normal part of you. Like you remember this movie, you remember this, you remember this. So imagine you wake up one day and you have memories of a life that isn't yours. Like, how do you understand that? Like, what is that phenomenon? Like, does that mean that past lives are real? Like, I don't know, but it's fucking weird. It's weird to wake up one day and have memories of a life that does not exist. But it's not imagination. It feels like a memory. It's not like something you make up. It's just you remember it. It has the same casualness of memory. And so my point is that, like, if you have an experience like that, which sometimes I work with people who have experiences like that, then I don't think you should just discard it because it's not logical, because clearly, like, that's coming from somewhere. So try to figure out, like, what's the deal with that? Like, is there some system of logic that does explain it? Investigate it. And don't discard it just because it's not logical.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Kind of like an anxious person might get anxious because there really is threat to the person.
Yes. So, for example, one patient that I worked with had anxiety for 17 years and had worked with multiple psychiatrists and therapists. And we've been able to help her a lot. And the way that we helped her was by starting with the idea that her anxiety is real and not false. That in and of itself has helped her immensely. Because she was aware of things that people told her as a child were not true that actually were. And so, like, that became anxiety because, like, but her fears were really real because she understood what was going on. And they just didn't explain it to her. And that's become her anxiety disorder. So the interesting thing is that the more that we embrace and explore her illogical anxiety, the more she realizes, oh, actually, I knew this all along. And the better, then now her anxiety is just, like, going away. It's really strange. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's strange.
Yeah, of course. Kind of like the feeling had a purpose with it, or a reason behind it, which
Absolutely
needed to be tackled.
Absolutely. So the takeaway for all of you guys is that don't just trust logic because logic is flawed or incomplete, and there are other sources of information. And what I try to do is just explore each and every one of those. Right? And try to figure out what your own answers are, irrespective of whether they're logical or not.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Take care.
Answer. See ya.